Hi everyone! Today we're going to read through the second chapter of Thirsty for Christ, titled Marginal Importance. Making time available for any activity is hard. We are a people and society that rewards being busy, and it leads to a feeling that we don't have extra time available for any other worthy activities. The reality is very different, although it may necessitate some changed perceptions. One way to think of it is like a margin. Margins can mean anything from the spaces at the edge of this page to margins of safety. Margins here, though, may best be thought of in financial terms. The Random House College Dictionary defines margin as the difference between the cost and the selling price. From the margin, a business derives its profit. Generally, the more built-in margin, the more stable and healthy the business. Our personal lives aren't very different than this. In this corollary, we should first assume that our cost is the time we need for all the activities that are core to our health, responsibilities, and interests. The selling price can then be thought of as the total time in any period. With these assumptions, the time margin is the difference between the time we have and the time we need for core activities. Many times in business, one cannot raise the price due to the market factors. Similarly, we cannot really increase the amount of time God has planned for our earthly existence. The only way to increase our time margin is to reduce the time spent on core activities. This can be very difficult and takes some sincere hard looks at how we spend the time we have. Do we really need to feel so stressed all the time, even on worthy activities? Increasing our margin of time is important to service. One cannot feel they are cramming yet another activity into an already packed schedule. Dr. Richard Swenson has written an entire book on this topic, aptly titled Margin. He explains, marginless is being asked to carry a load 5 pounds heavier than you can lift. Margin is a friend to carry half the burden. Marginless is not having the time to finish the book you're reading on stress. Margin is having the time to read it twice. Speaking on this thought, James Bryan Smith, in his book, The Good and Beautiful God, furthers the discussion by stating that the number one spiritual sickness of our day is hurry sickness. When we lack margin in our lives, we become tired and lonely and joyless, which seems to invite temptation. Of course, knowing and understanding the issue does not resolve the issue. There are many ways to increase the margin in one's life, but they need to be conscious and deliberate. Mr. Smith further states that there is a very simple but very difficult solution to the issue by just saying no. Say no to anything that is not absolutely necessary to the well-being of your soul or the welfare of others. At first, this seems a mighty high ledge to climb onto. However, it really does come down to looking hard at everything that needs time and eliminating unessential ones. One can also defer a task or activity to someone else. Many times this will help them flourish through the new responsibility. Reduce one's amount of television time. Is taking time to watch the news while also reading it off your smartphone or computer really necessary? Get up 15 minutes earlier in the morning. Go to bed 15 minutes later. Engage yourself in one church activity that you are passionate about, and let others grow in their service to the church by assuming those activities you are not passionate about. Become a facilitator instead of a doer. Look for others in your spheres of influence that are ready for growth and delegate. Don't check and reply to emails after reasonable hours. Make the effort to determine and quantify what robs you of margin. I'm certain that as you think it through, you will come up with many ways to increase your time margin that makes the most sense for you. Unlike time margin, which is a very important contemporary principle, tithing is an Old Testament principle that is also essential to contemporary discipleship. The need for followers of Christ to give back is critical to our faithfulness. Wouldn't it be fair that God would want to see us faithful in simple acts, such as this, before entrusting us with activities important to Him? As humans, we might wrongfully see this as a quid pro quo. Rather than heavenly deal-making, though, it seems only fair to me that God should get some assurance that we can be trusted before actually trusting us. If you have raised children, then as they grew, you likely followed a similar path. Carried further, I remember a time when I was blessed to be a partner of a company that sought to grow significantly. After making sure that all employees were being fairly compensated, they gave away 10% of the company's profits to various charities that represented our customer base. It was a way of not only being faithful to God, but also a way of giving back to the community that had enabled our success. We see similar results with our personal resources. How could we expect God to bless our company with exceptional growth if we could not demonstrate faithfulness with our company resources? This, of course, would never work with large or publicly held companies. But for small business executives, take the same step of faith in your business that you take personally, and watch what God does. I decided the best way to resolve my time margin issue was to be a little more inclusive on the meaning of tithing. If I release to God the financial tithe He asked for both personally and through the company He blessed me to steward, then why shouldn't I commensurately tithe my time? While not too scientific, here's what worked for me. I tried to determine my free time by removing the time committed to all my necessary activities from the finite time I had, such as 11 hours per day for work, including drive time, 8 hours for sleep, 1 hour for dinner, 2 hours per night on average for other obligations, like coaching my son's hockey team, driving my other son to guitar lessons, regular Bible study, etc. That only left about 2 hours per day free that I tended to fill up with a list too long to list. Then the weekends offered additional free time that I calculated at 8 hours per day, providing exceptions for church attendance, family visits, and of course, football season. All in all, with 10 hours during the week and another 16 during the weekend, I figured on having 26 hours per week available. If you've not had the pleasure, this is how an engineer like me thinks and gets two decisions. Giving a minimum tithe of at least 10% of my time for God to work meant I should be increasing my time margin at least 3 hours per week. Yes, God appreciates it when you round up. This still left a reasonable remaining 23 hours for all the other stuff. I'm sure your analysis could have similar or different obligations and allocations, but in the end, the result would likely be similar. As time went on, I shifted priorities to make sure I gave at least 3 hours per week to a couple of different charities. I soon realized that I had even more time than I calculated. Significantly, the stuff filling up my remaining 23 hours didn't seem as important or fulfilling as it once did. It was clearly not as important as the work I was allocating to the 3 tithe hours. My time margin grew all by itself from my love for service, and I found myself spending way more time on my godly work. Like many others that have traveled a similar path, I learned that service work and a desire to tangibly share Christ's love became integral to my personal core. Through the power of the Holy Spirit, everything I did during my daily routine began to radiate from this core. In essence, one doesn't have to add another category to life that needs to be forced into everything else, or added to the list of everything else. Rather, it just becomes a part of who you are, and you find plenty of time for everything. From this humble start at regular service work, I began to yearn for a special effort that would take advantage of my skill sets. I really wanted to feel like I was truly living within His will for everything I had to offer. The flip side to the desire of working free time into a busy schedule is those with extra time already available. I grant you nobody feels they have extra time. It would be nearly impossible to find anyone that would say they have extra hours each week that are just wasted. This is primarily because of our tendency to fill a vacuum. Have you moved into a new home with extra closet space? It will be filled up very shortly. Have a night with nothing to do? You probably use it as a time to discover the new television series everyone's talking about. You get the idea. We do everything we can to limit this situation in children and adolescents. Keeping them busy reduces the opportunity for them to get into trouble. I certainly wouldn't argue with that, and have employed this concept in the rearing of my own children. However, when as adults it creeps into virtually every aspect and every minute of life, it might be a good time to reassess one's priorities. Many studies have been conducted on this and conclude that we are all nearly as guilty in this regard. If we have free time, we fill it. As a young man, I had as much a product of this ailment as anyone. I did not marry until nearly 30 years of age. During this time of being single, and mostly free from financial or any other type of real burden, I had a ridiculous amount of free time. I became an armchair authority on virtually all sports, and filled huge amounts of time watching games and growing knowledgeable about the current condition of a great many teams and players. Again, there's nothing wrong with being a big sports fan, but I could have easily satiated my love of sports and still given God a little something. Today, it could easily be video games, social media, or any number of contemporary time killers. The sad truth in this is that it is the young that typically have the energy and freedom to really make a difference. Most importantly, they do not generally carry the baggage of those with a few more miles on the tread. Their creative approach to problem solving and understanding of new communication technologies can be vital to any nonprofit. As a ministry or nonprofit leader, harnessing these energies and skills infuses new life into any effort. If you are the one with time, you are badly needed. A great start is to simply identify something you are passionate about and then ask them, how can I help? I can easily come up with many examples of people that have increased their time margins to answer the bell in what they are called to do. I'm also sure you can think of people in your life that seem to all of a sudden be very involved in some activity or nonprofit. And then there are those who are just always seem to be able to work in time to their busy schedules when they feel it matters. Pastor Larry Wood is a mentor and good friend that held this ability, and was also responsible for my formative Christian development. Larry has been retired for some years now, but was the founding pastor of our church and oversaw its growth to a sizable congregation before retiring. The first time I met Larry was after attending my first worship service at his then somewhat young church, with about 300 members. A church that size has many needs from its pastor, and ours was no different. Larry's life was a conglomeration of everything anyone could imagine. I never knew how he held it all together. A typical day might include sermon development, staff meetings, session meetings, budget meetings, nighttime Bible study, visits to the hospital, senior living center, the children's day school, community programs, time with his wife, visits with his adult children, and any other humanly possible thing. But after a few services, I had the opportunity to meet him privately, and we spoke at length. I told him of my busy life that included a growing business, 2 young boys with more energy than an atomic bomb, and a particular problem that was really bothering me. At the time, I was president of the board of directors of a Habitat for Humanity affiliate in the Atlanta area. The affiliate had only built an average of 1 home every 2 years, and my board was unsure of how to grow the organization. The affiliate I stepped up to help with had some very significant structural issues, and I was spending a lot of time trying to determine a path forward. Larry didn't flinch when he simply asked, "How can I help?" Never one to be shy in accepting help, I told him, "I could use this perspective on our board." Larry then joined our board and proceeded to help me turn the affiliate around in just half a year. Soon we were building several houses a year, and the patient was stabilized. That was when Larry did something unexpected. He quit. We were all set for continued growth and set some heady goals. Then he just quit. It was then that I learned the real secret to time margin. He recognizes that his capabilities were no longer critical to our success, and he wanted to free his time margin for other needs. The word critical is, well, critical. He could have stayed on longer, like I had hoped for, but he knew when to pull out and help elsewhere. This first-hand exposure to a master doer was invaluable in understanding how to accomplish more for the kingdom, while still meeting all the familiar obligations everyone has. If you haven't already done it, I would highly recommend the exercise of determining what is truly critical to you and your service to God, and then exiting from all others. Your time margin, as well as sanity, might just increase significantly, and you'll be freer to fully execute His plan in your life. Life Lesson 2: Knowing when to leave an endeavor is critical to managing the time margin.